Hi guys, I'm Shmee, hello and welcome back to the channel where you join me today for a very Ford themed video, because believe it or not, the GT is now coming up to being 2 years old. It was this week 2 years ago that I flew out to Canada to see this very car being assembled by Multimatic on their assembly line in Markham, Ontario near Toronto. The time has flown by since I then took delivery of it at the Goodwood Motor Circuit, and very soon it will need to go for its second service. But today I'd like to tell you some of the costs that have been involved in the ownership of the Ford GT, what it's been like, some things that might surprise you, because primarily today we do need to head over to the Ford dealership. We're actually going to be taking the Heritage Focus RS for its second annual service as well. It arrived a couple of months just before the GT, and then later on I also need to move the Red RS as well, which likewise is coming up towards the service. So there's a lot going on, but we'll get the cars ready, head on out then. I'm hoping the weather is going to be okay. It was raining earlier on. Get over to the Ford dealership and along the way talk about some of the costs of the new Ford GT. Like I've said, we're in the countdown on the final days then of the cars being here in the storage in London until they find a new venue, a temporary venue at first, but nonetheless every opportunity to drive the GT is a very special one. I had it out at the Nürburgring a couple of months ago, but even since it came home, it's just been chilling here peacefully, and it's time to get it started again. Obviously we'll be moving the Red RS later on. I need to take that car and the Heritage after its service to bring them back home, but the Heritage today needs to go to the dealer. We're heading to the nearby dealer here in London. It's done about 5,000 miles, just over 5,000 miles in the 2 years so far since I collected it. Remember, I waited for the collection day because I really wanted it to wear the 68 plate. The reason being that 1968 was the year that effectively this car is the Heritage Car 4, given that was when the original Escort Mark 1 actually launched. 50 years later, 50 of them. It all added up very nicely, and I'll be keeping that with the GT in the collection long term. So we need to get things sorted. Both cars are actually plugged into their trickle chargers at the moment. I need to get those packed away just so we can take them on out. And yeah, let's get ready and head out in just a moment. Unplug the Heritage, and this is one of the reasons why I want out of this storage. We should not be having leaks around these kind of cars. So let's get this started. Nice reflection of the Lusso just there. Squeeze on in. Should be all well. Obviously it's not been driven too much recently, but nonetheless straight into life, and then we'll go get the GT ready too. I can't imagine there's any reason why we'll have any issues with this, but nonetheless, let's come through, start up the GT. It is hard to believe that it was now a year ago since this car actually had its service at Galpin in Los Angeles. Ignition on. All right, let's start it. This is not exactly the longest drive in the world. It's about 9 miles or so, just out a little bit around the North Circular, and then we'll get to the dealership, Trust Ford, where we're heading today, which is, I guess, technically my local Ford store. The Ford stores being the locations that can look after the RSs and also the Mustangs. They don't do the GTs, so the Ford GTs work quite differently here in Europe to the way that they do in the USA. You don't really get delivery of the car through a dealer here. You get the car from Ford UK themselves, Ford GB, and then they deliver the car to either your home or to any location you might specify. So in my case, that was why I rented the Goodwood Motor Circuit as a pretty special location to actually take delivery of this car, to drive it for the first time ever for a lap around the legendary Goodwood Motor Circuit. Anyway, it is very much a cruise. Being in this thing is complete spaceship. I talk about this all the time. It is insane to be sat inside because you are so low. The view is directly through this letterbox windscreen. Obviously it's a left-hand drive car here in the UK. You have the view in the mirrors back through the floating buttresses. It just feels like the most unreal thing, and at the moment the view in my rear view mirror is in fact the bright orange Heritage RS. And yes, I'm very Ford for today. I couldn't resist, had to be done. So we'll do this little drive over, and while we're going, let's now have a think about some of the costs involved, because with cars like this, it can vary hugely from one car to the next. The differences in what they are to run, and I think a lot of people know that this car carried a very high buy price, particularly here in Europe, where effectively you paid the US price, plus you paid for the conversion and homologation in Europe, plus you then paid for the flying of the car over to Europe, plus you then paid the 20% VAT and some duty. So it's a very expensive car to actually purchase here in Europe to begin with. When you've bought the car though, this is where it kind of changes. You have a service after 600 miles, 1,000 kilometers, and then from that point on you have them annually or after 5,000 miles, or if you're in an area, let's say, like the Middle East with lots of sand, after 2,500 miles, the car gets a lot of attention everywhere it goes. So every 5,000 miles or every 12 months it wants to have a service. So I had my first service done here in the UK. The second service was while I was driving it so much out of the USA. It was actually on the very day, you might remember, that Damon from Daily Driven Exotics had a little bit of fun smoking up my rear tyres, and I took the car over to Galpin Autosports in North Los Angeles, and we had the service done over there. Now we're only 2,000 miles or so later, but it's been a year. It's hard to believe that's been a year. That was 12 months ago that this car was in the USA. What a weird year this has actually been. But the services are oil change services at Ford dealerships, and they are not crazy. I mean, you might be expecting things like, you know, Carrera GTs where it's thousands per year, or 918s or P1s, a couple of thousand, if not more. Things like Koenigsegg's, Pagani's, 10 grand, 15 grand, I'm not sure exactly. But this is about 500 bucks or 300 or 400 pounds to have its annual oil change service. So it costs more to transport it to the dealer than it does to actually have the service done, which is pretty crazy when you think about it. Other costs involved in the car: tyres. Tyres were quite expensive. Tyres were actually surprisingly expensive. Of course, it's a specific Sport Cup 2 for this car. Over in the USA, they were difficult to get a hold of and came at a heavier price than I was normally expecting, more than the recent tyres I actually bought for the Senna, the Pirelli Trofeo Rs, which are McLaren stamped as well. Brakes, I imagine, will be a fortune when I get through them, and I have done a couple of days out on track, so they're not going to last forever. The carbon ceramic discs are going to probably be very expensive, but the base, I guess, outgoings, road tax here in the UK, it's a normal car, so £500 or so. Obviously it's in the top category. Yeah, letting me know about cameras. So it's in the top category. We also have warranty, 3 years warranty is standard included. They're looking into extended warranty packages in Europe, but obviously no car has reached that age yet. That's not a thing, it hasn't happened. So at the moment, you just have the 3-year warranty. With McLarens, they're about £4,000 a year, so I guess it will probably end up being in that ballpark if they do an extended warranty package. But outside of this, there isn't really much to be concerned about, because it's a Ford, and I think most things are actually quite reasonable. I have to say, Ford have done a magnificent job with the car. Whenever anything's gone or needed to be looked at, they've done it straight away. They've come to wherever the car is, or come to pick up the car, or just made it super easy, which is brilliant, the kind of service that you want. You know, I haven't had many issues with the car, but there were 1 or 2 recalls when it was new, 1 or 2 things it had to head off for. You might remember the tail light blinked when I was in New York, so they replaced that, which was really awesome. They put a European tail lamp into the Ford GT in the USA, so they had to get the parts that had probably gone from the US to Europe back to the US to fix the car before the car came back to Europe again. I mean, obviously, if it comes to flying a car around the world to go for a trip through America, that wasn't cheap, but I don't think that's a fair cost of the car, really, at the end of the day. So it is a bit of a cruise. I'm literally just chilling in traffic today, because this thing gets so much attention, it's a little bit stressful, so sometimes it's easier just to go slow, just take it easy, sit behind whoever you're behind, every car that goes by, and get over to the dealer where we'll drop the Heritage, and then bring this back, and then go move the Red, and then collect the Heritage, and it's all a little bit confusing. There's a lot going on today, but hey, it's what you got to do. There is actually one more pretty big cost that I do need to tell you about, but we're now on a slightly quicker road, so let's go into sport mode, into manual, drop some gears. The car is a little bit more warmed up now. That exhaust sounds good. The Akrapovic Sports titanium exhaust that was fitted at Galpin about a month actually before the service was carried out. So the other cost that I just alluded to is the insurance. Of course, this is a valuable car. It's a car that I'm not entirely sure what exactly it's worth, but somewhere around or perhaps just above what it costs to buy. And as such, it needs to be insured properly, and obviously it needs to be insured at the right price. It did cost in the first year to insure about £10,000, in the second year about £8,000. So this has been by far the biggest cost in connection with this car. I guess that's almost evened out a little bit in comparison to the servicing costs. It's significantly cheaper still than the Senna. The Senna insurance is more than that, which is moderately painful and terrifying, but it's part of owning a car of this nature. It's always going to cost a lot to insure it properly, especially given I'm not just insuring them to be parked up in a garage, I'm insuring them to be driven and used and do as many miles as I actually do with the cars, which is quite important to me, because I don't believe in garage queens. I like to have cars that actually be able to drive them and not be panicked and worried about doing so. So yes, insurance is a big one. The rest is all fairly sane, we could say, nothing crazy. Just the amount of attention that this gets as we're driving is terrifying, because everybody that drives past is looking at it, which of course causes them to veer slightly in a different direction, and then you have loads of thumbs up and things, which is really cool. It's amazing, I guess, the excitement that the car creates. You know, a lot of people are looking at this thing wondering, what is it? Because there are not exactly many of them around here, not many in Europe at all. The first batch, I think, was about 80 cars. Obviously the second batch is soon to start being delivered as well. It's amazing to think, though, that I've owned this car and been driving it already for 2 years. I just can't believe how quickly that time has actually flown by. But yeah, we're getting there, and I suppose some of you will have noticed that 2 years means that that's technically the end of the it can't be sold contract. There's a lot of discussions around that. This car is not about to be sold. Do not fear on that one in the slightest. Well, I was not expecting it to turn out to be so beautifully sunny today. In fact, it was raining when I arrived at the storage earlier, and now the sun is out, the roads are actually drying, and it's quite pleasant. This is quite how bizarre the weather is at the moment. It's been pretty horrific recently, to be honest, but we are actually about to arrive at the dealership, which did do the first year service on the car as well. So we head up this way towards the entrance around the back, where I'm not quite sure if we're going to find somewhere to park. Always a little bit of a struggle here, but we turn in and we'll go see what we can do and see how the procedures are working at the moment for the service drop-off of the Heritage RS. And of course, turning up at a Ford dealer in the GT is always quite a random thing. I mean, this doesn't happen often. I don't think many of these roll on through here. So let's see what we're going to do. We are parked up then with both cars now here in the sunshine, looking fantastic together. And I really like having both of these cars out side by side, because you might remember that the Alan Mann Racing Heritage Tribute livery that I did on the Ford GT pays tribute to the Escort RS back in 1968 that won the BTCC, which is why we have this car right now, the 68 plate, the 66 plate, the two cars together here outside the dealership. But I tell you what else was awesome. Of course, they don't normally see cars like this, so it's been great to spend a few minutes showing some of the staff around the car. Everybody came out to take a look at it, to be able to share what it's all about, because Ford make an ultimate supercar, an epic hot hatch. They make muscle cars, SUVs, saloon cars, just about everything. And having these two, I feel very, very lucky every single time. But I tell you, driving that car on the roads causes so much of a stir that it's actually verging on dangerous. The amount of people who overtake, slow down, try to let you go back past them so they can get shots, or are just staring at the car and not necessarily concentrating, you really have to keep your wits about you. Anyway, I need to head inside, hand over the keys so that the Heritage can go straight into the workshop to get serviced, and then I guess we'll head out with the GT, go sort out the red, come back later on. Lots to do. I really find it fascinating how quickly London has become anti-cars. Everything is now a 20-mile-per-hour zone. I think we can do this without the lift system. So all of these roads that used to be 30 are all now 20 in the borough of Westminster and some of the other central London boroughs, the 40s and 30s and so forth. I talked a little bit about this recently, but it's part of why I'm now moving out of this storage, why I'm not going to stay here with my cars in London, because it makes no sense. Like I've said a few times, it never really made sense, but this is literally the speed limit everywhere, which is, I mean, people make jokes about you can hardly drive over this speed anyway, but most places you can. You know, here now goes up to 30, but here you'd have had no problems any time driving at 30 miles an hour, and now it's 20, which, yes, okay, safety, more cyclists on the road, etc., but if you're a car person, just being in a city makes no sense anymore. Just no sense at all. I remember when this was a 60 limit. This used to be a 60, now it's a 30. Along the way it was a 40, but I haven't been driving for that long, and well, times have changed, average speed cameras, I talk about this all the time. It's just not very friendly. Anyway, we're going to go back to the storage, swap over to the red RS, leave the cars in the storage, which we're going to take as a mini convoy over to the new temporary storage, and then bring the red RS back to the flats, because I'm going to keep the Heritage, the red, the G-Wagon in the garage at the flat for the time being, so they're a little bit closer than some of the other cars. And then I've actually got a location to go and check out, which is quite exciting, although that will of course be private because I can't film somewhere that isn't mine. I wish that I could actually share some of the places I've been to see with you guys, but obviously I'm not allowed to film until I've put down a deposit and signed a contract, for obvious reasons. So alas, I cannot do that, but I'm excited. We'll see how this goes. And yeah, this is 30 miles an hour, hey? Cruising. After parking the GT up for now, I've just spent a bit of time tidying everything away, which I'm not gonna lie, is a very strange feeling. So all of the car covers, which I've loaded up basically into the boot of the Red RS, it's now completely full. There are more things I'm gonna need to work out in due course, but for the time being, I'm gonna take the Red RS, head back home for a minute, and then later on head back to get the Heritage. Time then for the third Ford startup of the day. No problems there. The thing with this car, as we know, is that it can be completely entertaining. Yes, sometimes when you get these bangs going off, they can be pretty loud, I'm not gonna lie. Of course you can stop that, but we're driving on a main road at the moment. Anyway, it's just a case of heading back, I think, towards home for the moment. Again, taking it very slowly, steadily, easily, boringly. It'd be so much more exciting to be out of the city. Even these kind of tasks to take the RSs around, and this car will need a service, which I'm going to do at Mount Tune, because of course it has all of the Mount Tune engine upgrades, and I think it's better to have them look after and maintain it. I don't know, and I've talked about this a little bit, what's going to be the future for this car. I didn't intend to keep it forever. I intended to use it more this year than I've been able to, for obvious reasons, because I've been abroad for such extended periods and I haven't taken this car on any of the trips. But I've owned it for 2.5 years, had a massive amount of fun doing the full project, bringing you guys along for all of the modifications, all of the changes, everything that we've done to the car. But I do think the time might be coming to finally move it on to a new home, and especially if I'm going to set up the garage as I would like it, that's a huge financial outlay and commitment, and part of me says, with the GTR Roadster, the GT Black Series, and some more things on the horizon, something has to give at some point, and 1, 2, maybe 3 cars will have to go, and the Supra hasn't actually sold at this point, so maybe that's going to have to end up coming back to the garage, and we'll see if something else goes for sale instead. All updates that will come to you guys shortly. Now you might be able to hear in the background, there's a slightly funny noise which actually comes from the rearview mirror trim. Not the most complicated piece in the world, and in fact nothing we even modified, so I do need to get that looked into at some point because it's kind of annoying. Anyway, I'm gonna head home. I've had the call to say the Heritage RS is ready, and then at some point go and pick it up. Fast forward just a little bit, I got back with the Red RS, jumped out into an Uber to go and pick up the Heritage RS, got that back home, then jumped into the G63 to go out and visit a unit that might become the Shmeemuseum, although I'm a bit on the fence about this one that I've just been to see, and now we're back here at home with the Heritage. Just upstairs we've got the G63 and the Red RS, and the 4 cars currently at storage, with 3 other cars I think at the moment over in Germany, and 1 more in the UK elsewhere. Yes, all very confusing. This has been quite a long day, a bit of errand running, of course, with all of the Fords, but also an insight into some of the costs behind the GT, what it's been like in the nearly 2 years now that I've owned that car, and some of the amazing memories I've already built up with it. Things like the delivery at the Goodwood Motor Circuit, taking it down to Sardinia to join the Pagani Raduno, some amazing shots from that trip, also driving the Nürburgring, taking it around the USA, and plenty more. It is well and truly a permanent Shmeemobile, as is this car. I do think, like I said earlier, the Red RS might find a new home at some point, but for today, a bit of an update on what's going on. I think next up is basically going to be taking all of the cars that are in the storage to a new place, which seems a little bit bonkers really. It's been 4 years there, but it is time now to move on. So thank you very much for watching, guys. As always, I appreciate your support an awful lot. That is it for this time though. I'll see you again very soon. Cheers.